Okay, so the title of my talk is Shut Up and Calculate, actually not Contemplate, and what Zen practice taught me about quantum theory. And let's see. So shut up and calculate is a well-known term, and it refers to the pragmatic approach of the Copenhagen interpretation. And it was coined by David Mermin in this article from 1989. If I were forced to sum up in one sentence what the Copenhagen interpretation says to me, it would be shut up and calculate. But I won't shut up. I would rather celebrate the strangeness of quantum theory than deny it, because I believe it still has interesting things to teach us about how certain powerful but flawed verbal and mental tools we once took for granted continue to infect our thinking in subtly hidden ways. Shut up and contemplate, and I wish I had come up with this title, but actually I didn't. So it was two other physicists who worked on quantum foundations, namely Lucien Hardy and Robert Beckens. And in this article, it's a lot of text. I just read it quickly. Because I think it has some insights. Quantum theory is a peculiar creature. It was born as a theory of atomic physics early in the 20th century, but over time its scope has broadened to the point where it now underpins all modern physics with the exception of gravity. It has been verified to extremely high accuracy and has never been contradicted experimentally. Yet, despite its enormous success, there is still no consensus among physicists about what this theory is saying about the nature of reality. There is no question that quantum theory works well as a tool for predicting what will occur in experiments. But just as understanding how to drive an automobile is different from understanding how it works or how to fix it, should it break down, so too is there a difference between understanding how to use quantum theory and understanding what it means. The field of quantum foundation seeks to achieve such understanding. In particular, it seeks to determine the correct interpretation of the formalism. It also seeks to determine the principles that underlie quantum theory. Why do we have a quantum world as opposed to a classical world or some other kind of world entirely? Another motivation is that quantum theory is likely not the end of the road. If we are to move beyond it, then it is important to know which parts can be changed or generalized or abandoned. Finally, there are the personal motivations of individual researchers, because quantum theory is very mysterious and counterintuitive and surprising, and it seems to defy us to understand it. So here it articulates that maybe our current understanding is not the end of the story, and that maybe we have to dig deeper to figure out what quantum mechanics truly means, and maybe there's an underlying deeper theory. And then comes the quote, the field of quantum foundations does not merely exist to tidy up the mess left behind after the physics has been done. Rather, it should be regarded as part and parcel of a great project of theoretical physics to gain an even better understanding of the world around us. So this sees like to understand the world in which we live and operate, we eventually have to understand quantum mechanics, or at least what it truly means. Thinking about foundations pays off in the long run. David Mermin, who made the other quote, once summarized a popular attitude towards quantum theory as shut up and calculate. We suggest an alternative slogan, shut up and contemplate. So here comes this word contemplate, which also relates to my title and the subtitle actually, namely the Zen Practice, which is about contemplating in the proper way and using contemplation as a source for insight. And how this works, I will describe on the following slides. But first, I have to mention that Zen or Chan Buddhism is a part of Buddhism. And just on one slide, briefly condensed what Buddhism is and what it isn't. So in my view, it is not a philosophy. It's not a psychology or cosmology or metaphysics, although it's often practiced this way. It's not monism or idealism, and it's not a monotheistic or polytheistic religion. And I would suggest that it can be described as a way to realize what mind is. And here, mind is with a capital M. So it's not just your thinking mind, it's something which comes before, as I will explain later. And an invitation to look deeply into the nature of suffering. This is the first noble truth, and this is what Jay mentioned several times in his talk, and to thereby discover how mind works. So this is what Shakyamuni Buddha used as an entry point to build his, in a sense, understanding of the world. He asked with this question, he started with this question, what is suffering? He didn't start with why is a particle here moving there in this amount of time? Why does an apple fall? This is, in a sense, not his starting point. And interestingly, the dynamics one ends up with is based on causality, which includes, in a sense, all the physics too. But the question it starts off with is has a psychological component too, not just a physical component. This is the main difference between, I would say, Buddhism and the scientific method in the Western world. And this is a bit cryptic sentence. It could be described as a practice that sees suffering as a temporary manifestation or appearance which is confusedly believed to be reality. So ultimately, even the suffering, if it may feel so real, but ultimately when it's connected with a proper understanding of how things work, it's revealed as illusionary too. So how to arrive at these conclusions? And the way is contemplation, or one can describe it as turning the mind's eye inward. So, and actually this mind's eye we all have. So we all have this faculty already built in. And practice, so what does this mean, turning the mind's eye inward and contemplation? And it's all often described in the Western terms as pondering. And or thinking deeply about a problem. And here I would like to suggest that it's exactly not that. It's something else. And it's important to get this right. And a system which really focused on developing contemplation in the proper way is Zen. And it derives from the Sanskrit word dhyana, or Pali jhana, and it's related etymologically to gnosis, to knowing. And then as the Buddhist teachings, they spread, 500 years later, they went from India to China. This term became chana, and then it became abridged and chan. So it still goes back to this Indian term. And in Japan, it then became Zen. And what it means is meditative absorption, contemplation. And Zen, or Chan, advocates to use contemplation as a means to cultivate wisdom. And from there, naturally, the natural product of wisdom is compassion. Chan practice illuminates layers of misconceptions and habitual perceptual behavioral patterns, and eventually uproots, cuts through them. So here's it's appreciated that as long, in a sense, our interpretation of the world is off, we will engage or in situations unskillfully, because it's not truly the way things are. We may think they are this way, but it's like distorted because of habitual patterns, because of hidden interests, which are not made conscious, because of, in a sense, survival. This is also what the survival instinct, what Jay mentioned. And the value of thinking, of theory, abstraction is not negated, but it's made clear that a realization of how mind works cannot be attained by the intellect. So you cannot think your way to understanding how mind works. It's like trying to clean off blood with blood. So there's a nice Zen story which can be read like this. And it's about this Japanese master, Nanin, who received a university professor who came to inquire about Zen. So this Nanin, the master, served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full and then kept on pouring. So the cup was overflowing. The professor watched the overflow until he no longer could restrain himself. It is overfull. No more will go in. Like this cup, Nanin said, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? So this is touches on a deep point that, in a sense, and for example, my Zen teacher had to do this with me too. He first had to made me remove all my instinct or habitual instinct to understand with a thinking mind, to understand Buddhism with a thinking mind, and to understand how mind works with this mindset, because this is how I'm used to understand and approach problems. This doesn't work. It's much easier through contemplation. And Zen or Chan is a practice, not a theory. So this is one of the differences. And this practice grew out of Buddhism, but it can be combined with other spiritual traditions. So you can, in a sense, whatever you learn here by learning how to contemplate properly, you can apply it even if you are not a Buddhist, or even if you are atheist, or just want to do science. It's a useful skill to develop. And sitting meditation, zazen, is a core part of this practice. So now, what is contemplation? In short form, it's not thinking, it's not cogitation. In contemplation, the mind is resting in the present moment. So I now have selected a couple of sentences which may give you a taste for what it would mean. So I just present them, just let them sink in. So the present moment is very important. The moment the mind is somewhere else, like planning or in the past, it's already lost the connection to true reality, which can only be found here. Mind's attention is placed before or beyond thought. So if you look and do introspection, there's thinking. So now the question is, what instance is attending or is aware of this thinking arising? What is this? And to bring the mind back into this layer. Thoughts are illuminated by the intrinsic awareness of the mind, but not attached to. So they are not attended. They are not giving any further attention, because what happens then? It's like as soon as one gives attention to a thought, the mind is directed to a thought, and actually then it has a tendency to create more thoughts. It's called mental proliferation. It's the monkey mind. It's too much thinking. There's no need to suppress thoughts, but one needs to let them go. Over time, what will happen? The result of it is the mind will clear up, proliferation of thoughts will cease, and it will be easier to stabilize the mind in the here and now. So, and I would suggest that we try this out, just 1 minute, so don't be afraid. And if you don't want to participate, it's fine too. In order to do this, before I explain how, I explain what is particular to the style in which I practice, which is Chan. And there we have a so-called method. It's an anchoring thought. So, and it can be, for example, watching the breath. So it's like for 1 minute, we will just place the mind's attention on the tip of the nose, or wherever you can feel the breath. and just focus it there for 1 minute. And typically what happens is thoughts will bubble up like crazy. And when the thought is strong enough, it will carry the mind away from the breath, and to then bring the mind back to the breath. So this is a Zen practice in a nutshell. So let's do this for 1 minute. We are all sitting, so it's fine, just remain seated. What is important is to, if you want to participate, to bring the back to make it straight, like an antenna. This is important, and to be as relaxed as possible. If you want to do this at another time and longer, then the sitting posture is recommended, and you can find out tons of how to do it on the internet. So we will do 1 minute now, and then I will ring a bell when it's done. And during this 1 minute, just try to, you can leave your eyes open or closed, and just try to keep the mind on the sensation of the breath at the nostrils, at the tip of the nose, or in the belly, wherever you can feel it, and to let the thoughts, whatever appears, go by. So for 1 minute. Okay, I don't know whether you heard the song of the bell. So this is gives you a glimpse of Zen. We will have another session a bit later, and then where I will fine-tune a little bit. If anyone has maybe a remark or a question, please feel free to chime in and just ask them. If that's not the case, I will continue. Okay. So since now we have settled the mind a little bit, let's get another chant story. By the way, these chant stories, similar as koans, they are often very paradoxical, seemingly, but they have there's a way to unlock their meaning, but you can not get your way to it through thinking. But with a contemplative mindset, this is the method which will unlock their meaning. So in a sense, they are a good thermometer to check where you are in your contemplation. So this is a fun chant story. It's called Baizang's Geese, and Baizang was a master himself, but at that time he was still a student of Master Matsu from the Tang Dynasty. It's the golden age of Zen, of Chan in China. And they both went on a walk. They saw a group of wild geese flying by. And Master Matsu said, "What is that?" Baizang said, "These are wild geese." Matsu said, "Where are they going?" Baizang said, "They flew away." Matsu then grabbed Baizang's nose and twisted it very hard. Baizang screamed in pain and said, "Ouch, ouch." Matsu said, "Do you still say that they flew away?" Baizang broke out in a sweat. Then he had a deep realization. Realization in this context always means a moment, an instance of awakening. It's not the full thing, but it's a kind of deep insight into the workings of mind. So I will not analyze this the poem, but it points to something deep about how we represent like what comes through our senses, how we have the tendencies to extrapolate, to reify things into like experiences into objects, and then to make stories out of them. And in a sense, the Zen practice cuts through this, which is necessary to realize how mind works. So if this story is cryptical, which usually it is, and it takes years to unlock these the meaning of these stories, then it's because contemplation needs to be the right contemplation. It needs to be coupled with what in Buddhism is called right view. It's maybe you have heard about the Eightfold Noble Path. If you don't, I talked about it in the last year, like in 2021, and there's a link to the recording. And right view is quite radical. But again, it's like similar to what Jay pointed out. These truths and these natures and realities, they have different layers. So this is a case with right view too. There's like a right view on a phenomenological or conventional truth level, and then there's right view on a intermediate level, which appreciates causality and looks deeply into it. And then there's a transcendental right view, or which corresponds to ultimate reality. These two truths also of Nagarjuna. So I will just present a little bit how the implications of right view. One implication is that any mental process like thought, feeling, perception, volition, this motivation, and consciousness, as well as material form, are seen as conditioned phenomena, temporal processes. So far, this is fine, right? We don't have a problem with this. This is aligned with physics and also with our introspective knowledge or intuition. And these processes are unfolding within mind. And mind I put here in quote because, and it has a capital M. So in a sense, it's not just your mind. It's something bigger. It's something infinite in a sense. But the moment you make it into a thing, you are off. So, and also it implies that physical processes are also unfolding in this mind. So this is a radical departure to our way of approaching physics. Because in our radical way, or our way is usually we take a physical world for granted and then we try to analyze it by careful observation. When we do this, we are already missing something, namely the embedding within mind. In Chan, mind is described as inconceivable, signless, formless, unconditioned, luminous, unborn, wondrous, pure, knowing, infinite, still. So this sounds very etherical and woo-woo. Then comes something very important, also with respect to how we meditate. This mind is not your mind, and it's not my mind, and it's just mind, and is actually the mind we are already using right now. So this is the particularity of Zen practice. It always brings it back to where you are right now. So in a sense, you already have it all. You just need to awaken to it. It's nothing you have to add to it. It's we are already using this mind in quotes, which is referred to here, but we confuse it with our mind. This is a cardinal mistake. And consciousness is seen as a conditioned process, and it's described as empty. Why? Because it's conditioned. And in Buddhism, whenever something is conditioned, It's empty. It's connected to everything else, which led up and brought it up, but it lacks a true essence. This is what Jay talked about. Consciousness is seen as a projection of mind onto mind, is described as an illusion, a phantasm, as a dream in one of the sutras. And so the ultimate reality, in a sense, is mind, and consciousness is seen as a process within it, and therefore, in a sense, illusory. And just as Jay pointed out, illusory doesn't mean that it's not there, but it's relatively there. It's a way of perception. Likewise, feeling, perception, volition, and even material or physical form are seen as illusions as part of this dream. So this is quite reminiscent to what Don Hoffman was talking about in his talk last year, like consciousness as a headset. It projects useful information, which we need to our survival, but ultimately not truly there. It's kind of a navigation system or interface, a desktop. Well, Buddhism says yes, and this also applies to physical form and to time and space. All these categories are seen as ultimately not true. The proper attitude would be to consider that everything is mind. It's all mind. So not just experiences, but also physical form and everything. So it's kind of a virtual reality, but there's nothing out of it. So in a sense, it won't get realer than this, because mind, in a sense, is a totality. And since it's the totality, there's no way to really talk about mind, because you could only do this in contrast to something which is not mind. But since it's all mind, well, you can also say it's no mind, or continue this regression, it's no mind. Until that is realized, I mean, logically it's hard to get there, or it doesn't make sense. It's good to maintain a don't know mind attitude. This is a slogan by a famous Korean Zen master, Sung San, or my own teacher, Gilbert Gutierrez. He says to just bring up this question anywhere you go. What is mind? What is mind? So always have this running in the background, which will prevent you from attaching too much into situations and to reify them, to make them into things. So this is a big problem we make. Okay, now with this, and especially this information, that this quote, that the proper attitude is not to confuse our mind, like that it's truly ours. Then there's a fun, interesting Zen story here which points this out, and it goes back to the founder of Zen, or who brought the first patriarch of Zen, Bodhidharma, and his student Huike, which is the second patriarch. So here again, student Huike is asking Bodhidharma, his master, I have a restless mind, and I beg the master to settle it for me. And Bodhidharma answers, bring me your mind, and I will settle it for you. Huike, after searching for his mind, I can't find it. Bodhidharma, there, I have already settled it. With this fine-tuning, if you may, I would invite you to have another sit, again 1 minute, and then we are done with the sittings. But so we will just do the same, but now keep in mind that the mind that is watching the thoughts arising is not your mind. So no need to label the thoughts your thoughts. It's just thoughts arising in mind. And to just sit with this orientation and to see whether it makes any difference. Okay, 1 minute. So relax again, bring eyes open or closed, however you want, and point the mind to the tip of your nose where you can feel the breath. And for this minute, all thoughts that appear, just let them go. Have nothing to do with you. What is aware of these thoughts is not your mind. It's just thoughts arising in mind. Not your mind, not my mind. Okay. So the next thing is maybe you have realized or observed that it's not that easy to keep the mind on the method. And that there are always thoughts arising, like how do you say, well, when you have the rockets being sent out at New Year's, I forgot the name. So it's a bit like this, that our mind is plenty, or our mind is plenty of thought. Why? Because there's so much momentum behind these thoughts. They arise because of habitual tendencies, and untrained mind will be totally covered with these thoughts, and therefore will be difficult to make wise decisions, because we will always hop on the strongest thought, and we will just react instead of respond. So, and actually, then the early Buddhists looked through meditative practice. They looked deeply into the mental processes, and they now made a theory out of it. And it's understood that whatever theory you come up with, it's wrong, but it may still be useful. This is the Buddhists are very clear about it, and whatever theoretical framework they come up with, it's intended to inform the practice. So at the end, it always comes back to the practice. And they talk, the early Buddhism and the Abhidharma system talks about individual mind moments, which consist of coming together of a sense object, which could be a sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, a thought. So thought is considered also a sense object. So in Buddhism, we talk about 6 senses, not just 5. A sense base or a sense faculty, which would be the organ, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Mind is considered as an organ. And a sense consciousness. So this is interesting because Buddhism addresses consciousness explicitly, although consciousness is seen as empty, as not the real thing. So, and then it talks about eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, and so on until mind consciousness. So we have mind consciousness, which has yeah, so it's actually coming together of these three things to have to form a mind moment and to leave an imprint. If they are slightly off in their timing, it won't match. It will just flow through. A mental process is a very quick succession of mind moments that are causally linked, and I will explain this on the next slide. And very quick means you find different time scales mentioned, but one quote is like the moment it takes to blink an eye and a thousandth of this moment. Like it would be kind of milliseconds or maybe smaller. But you also find elsewhere other comparisons which make it sound that we could be even talking nanoseconds. And who knows, maybe it's even the time scale of the Planck scale. Who knows? And it's not as quantitative as one wish it would be for a physicist. So, and a way to depict this is not really accurate, but it may provide the idea. You have the coming together at moment to moment, like time is there's a fundamental time unit, and then these objects and the consciousness itself vary. They always come into one of these six modalities, but even there, it's never the same. So there are always subtle differences, and you can think of them as a type of stochastic process, but it has infinite memory too. It's not just a Markov process. So it's the next state here will not just be determined on the previous state, but it will have to go back to all the previous states. So this is one way to think of it. This would be a microscopic description of the stream of consciousness within mind. A process always needs a matrix or something to unfold in. Now, what Jay brought up in his talk, he called it the causal principle or pratītyasamutpāda, but he didn't really explain it, is described here, and we have no time to go into all the details, but it shows the heart, the core causal principle of Buddhism, how the different states of mind on various timescales come about. So, and you see, consciousness is here. I hope you can see my pointer. It's at roughly 3 o'clock. Consciousness is just seen as part of a process. So it's not the ultimate thing. And what actually, so this diagram has to be read in a clockwise direction. So what the consciousness that is meant here is a consciousness which has to be there when an organism forms. And it's kind of providing the coherence for the morphogenetic process to unfold properly. This is my way of rendering it. Then the body and mind, and here the mind has not the capital M, but a lower M. It's like the like the brain, if you want, develops. Then the sixth sense bases develop, including the mind sense, the sixth sense. And then when there's a coming together of these mental objects, faculty, and consciousness, contact is made, which will result in a feeling, a sensation, which can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If it's pleasant, we want more of it. If it's negative, we want less of it. If it's neutral, we don't know. If we want more of it, there's craving. The same, if we don't want more of it, is negative craving, it's just the same. Then there's attachment or total rejection. So it always goes in both ways. And then there's like a re-imprinting, and there's a becoming. For example, if you like drugs, you have it for the first time. You want more, well, you will become a drug addict sooner or later. So this will be the becoming, and you will be kind of from now on a drug addict, which is a kind of birth. And then maybe you will get out of your habit and craving again. Then this will be the drug addictiveness in you will die. But also this, and it will go on and on and on, because we don't see how strong we are governed by the patterns which run in our mind. And unless we, so this is called fundamental ignorance, which will then result again into volition, motivations, and will keep us going around and around and around. So we have like past causes will lead to present effects, will then plant the seeds for present causes and for future effects. So this is one way of looking at it. I could talk all the session about just these 12 links and even beyond, but we don't have the time. So you could say this is the dynamics which govern the streams of consciousness according to Buddhist understanding, and it keeps us circling in around it, like in a cogwheel. As long as we don't see what is going on, and we go round and round, we are in samsara. This is, and there's a way to break out of it once we start unconditioning the mind from all these patterns. This would be then nirvana. And in early Buddhism, the goal is to get out. In Mahayana, later Buddhism, the goal is to see, no, this is what is going on. Ultimately, there is no way out because it's all mind. Whether you are caught in your obsessions and habits, or whether you are out, is still mind. So this is then the insight of Zen, that actually this mind and where you are is already perfect. You just have to deepen your understanding what is going on, and then you can just remain where you are. So there's no way, no need to become, to say bye-bye to the world and go into the woods and meditate forever. Is already, everything is perfectly at its place. Just don't fall, become a victim of your habits and get out. And how to do this? Contemplation and turning the mind's eye inward. Then this would be another way of looking at the causal principle, is like zooming out even further. And Jay mentioned it. It's to use this metaphor for the dynamics of the mind in terms of seeds, cultivating seeds, planting seeds, and then they will eventually grow if the conditions are there. And these could be seeds of wisdom, seeds of ignorance, seeds of anger, and seeds of love, whatever. And it's seen that as long as we cultivate certain mind states, well, we will, these mind states like anger, for example, they will sooner or later, our trajectories will gravitate towards a more angry environment, because we will start surrounding ourselves with angry people, because this is in a sense what we planted. But it goes in both ways. This is an interesting thing. Of course, this is called karma in Buddhism, and it's a causal principle, but it's more like an autocatalytic thing. So it's not just cause effect, which would be linear in time, but it also feeds back. And it's like an autocatalytic network. So even if a seed is there, if the conditions are not ripe, it will not flourish. So the conditions is important, and oftentimes the causes may be there. For example, two nations want to go to war, and it's very hard to get rid of the causes because it's so deeply ingrained. But even if we cannot get rid of the causes, there's still possibility to work on the conditions, which may be even much easier thing to do. So this is appreciated in Buddhism. And you can, everything what arises, every situation which comes up according to Buddhist understanding is precisely arising. So is no room for any form of stochasticity ultimately there of randomness. If it appears random, it just means because there's a lack of wisdom to appreciate all the causal nexus which flows together in the situation. Then which would be ignorance. As I mentioned, once one one applies this or one appreciates this causal principle, there are ethical implications and the importance of assuming responsibility for all our actions through body, speech, and mind. And this will ultimately lead to compassion, because the insight to which Buddhism opens up is that it's all so deeply interconnected that the best way to deal even with our worst enemies is compassion. This will be the natural realization. It doesn't sound, it sounds very paradoxical to when you come from a utilitarian point of view, which always tries to maximize your own interest and then determine what is the best strategy. To this type of mindset, it doesn't make sense, because then there's a cost function, there's optimization, and you always try to optimize your own survival, but it's kind of foolish from a Buddhist point of view, because you are part of the entire system already. So if you try to optimize your own boundary, it may work for a certain time, but it will at some point all collapse. It's just a matter of time. Okay, so now we are 15 minutes in the talk. So I think I will talk for 1 hour, so 10 more minutes. Now, how do we connect all of this to quantum theory? Okay, so there are many parallels I see, and one of them I addressed in my previous talk, which you can retrieve online. It's on the basis of logics. So similarly, how we connect quantum theory to quantum-like models, one way, elegant way to do it is to appreciate the logics is similar. So here we can just do the same, because what is called Buddhist logic is very similar to quantum logics. So this would be a natural way to do it. I won't talk about it today. Contextuality, this is what Jay addressed, Nagarjuna's teachings on emptiness and the relational interpretation of quantum mechanics. Today we'll talk about projections and the view mentioned in the Yogacara school of Mahayana Buddhism, that sees consciousness as a mental fabrication, as a projection of mind onto mind. And this has certain similarities to measurements in quantum mechanics. And then what I call don't know attitude. So there's a certain paradox which is at the heart of both Buddhism, or especially Zen Buddhism, and interpretations of quantum mechanics. So a short refresher, because it hasn't been mentioned in our bootcamp this year, how to depict quantum mechanical processes and dynamics. So in the following, just for simplicity, I will use the Copenhagen framework. Doesn't mean I hold it for right or wrong. It's just the way, one way to depict the quantum mechanical framework. So a quantum state of a system is represented by a vector of a normalized length, has a length 1, in an abstract space, which is called Hilbert space. And then, in the absence of measurements by an observer, the quantum state is performing a rotation in the state space, so not in physical space. So it's in this abstract feature space, if you want. And it's described by the Schrödinger equation, whatever it is. So it's just rotating. So it has a certain frequency. And of course, this could be in a high dimensional space, not necessarily two-dimensional like here. Then measurements, when a measurement involve an observable and a reference frame defined by the eigenvectors of that observable. So this sounds very cryptic. So what it means is simple, actually. In the slide before, we just had this state, nothing else. Now we have a dynamics, it rotates, but we have no reference frame yet. So now as soon as we try to make a measurement, we kind of add a structure, namely which represents the observable, and the observable has certain outcomes, and they are represented by orthogonal directions, which span the space. And then with a certain probability, one can, for example, measure outcome A, B, and C. And the probabilities are described by Born's rule, and we will hear more about it tomorrow. And the probabilities are just based on the projection of the actual state onto the all possible outcomes in the menu of possible answers. And then once outcome has been selected, answer has been provided, then the next state needs to be consistent with this answer. So the answer will determine the future state. So this is called the collapse of the wave function. And of course, now you can ask, what is this meaning? Has something been created through observation? Is the observer participating and therefore not really separable from the measured? Do the wave functions exist or not? All of these questions come up, and I won't go into all of this here. Oh, and then I also wanted to mention that there's something like the Zeno effect, which if you measure a state right after the measurement, it's here. If you measure it again, it will still be here. So it needs to be consistent. And so if you keep on measuring at very high frequency, actually your state, which will just stop evolving because it will always be probed. So you can freeze through measurements, you can freeze a system. It's called the quantum Zeno effect. Okay, so now some analogies I suggest. So we have the measurement collapse, we have the free flow when there's no observation running. We have the embedding space, like the Hilbert space itself. So again, it's not physical space, it's state space. So now, and some analogies. So this is all not worked out, but these are like analogies I often think about is, so what if this collapse could be compared to cogitation? What if this free flow could be compared to contemplation? So not thinking. And Chris Fields mentioned in his talk that there isn't any observation without measurement. So in a sense, this image here, he questions whether it can happen, it's applicable, because this seems to imply that there's some instance which can observe without interacting. And according to Buddhism, actually this may apply because in Buddhism or in Zen we differentiate between two ways of perception. One is the perception or observation via the senses, the sense faculties, so eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. But then, interestingly, in Chan, one distinguishes between this perception via the senses and another way of perceiving, which is called direct perception, true perception, yogic perception, or mind's intrinsic perception. So, and just as a question, I would bring up that what if this is possible? What if there's a way to observe without interfering, but it's then not routed through the senses, but through mind itself, which is not your mind. Just let it stand here. There's a famous Chan poem which describes the sentiment very nicely, and I would like to read it. It's called the needle of Zazen. So pivotal essence of every Buddha, essential pivot of every ancestor, is knowing without touching, illuminating without encountering. This knowing without touching is naturally subtle. Illumination without encountering is naturally profound. The naturally subtle knowing has never engaged in discriminative thinking. The naturally profound illumination has never displayed the slightest dawning. Never engaging in discriminative thinking is itself singular without duality. Never displaying the slightest dawning is itself completely without grasping. The water is clear right to the bottom, fishes leisurely swim on, the sky is vast without boundary, birds fly far into the distance. So this is describing and laying out a contemplative and actually awakened mind state. So now the last part of my talk, the many interpretations of quantum mechanics. So I think Pavo already brought up this slide. So when you look at it, it's interesting. You have listed here the various interpretations, or at least some of them, and then whether they are like the wave function is taken for real or not, whether there are hidden variables, yes or not, whether there's collapse happening, yes or not. So you see in a sense, and green is yes, and red is no, and yellow is maybe, or don't know. So you see there's no, all of these interpretations kind of don't mix up. They are in disagreement. So they kind of are incompatible, one could say. But they all are interesting, and they all may point to something interesting about the reality. So do we need to ditch them all? Are they all true? We don't know. But the question is, why is quantum mechanics so weird the moment we try to interpret it? So I would like to propose a hypothesis, and I will start with the assumption that what if the description provided by the ancient masters through contemplation and introspection, such as how the mind works, are applicable, or later on, this is in the Mahayana school, there's this radical view formulated that all phenomena are manifestations of mind, so including physical phenomena. So what if all of this applies? And then how would the physics look like? So what would be the resulting dynamics of physical processes if one were to ignore all aspects belonging to consciousness in the Buddhist models of mind? So the Buddhist models of phenomena, of course, mind is an integral part. The physical form and its dynamics is not negated, but it's kind of embedded in a much larger structure. So what would be the resulting dynamics if all the mental dimensions are traced out, are integrated over, are just discarded? And I would suggest that the possibility is that we would just retrieve quantum theory. And maybe the difficulty of arriving at the ultimate interpretation of quantum mechanics and the mutual mismatches of existing interpretations is a feature rather than a bug. And then this would be the last slide, I think. There's a paper which was brought to my attention when I was preparing for these slides. And it's Robert Scharf is a Buddhist scholar, very much like Jay. They are both colleagues. And he wrote a very interesting paper that appeared in 2021 on the looping structure of Buddhist thought, or how Chan Buddhism resolves the quantum measurement problem. So I read it. It's quite accessible. It's very well written. I would encourage everyone to look it up. And he talks about the strange loop, which you can find in both, trying to make sense of Buddhism through philosophies, the Yogacara school, the Madhyamika school, and so the Abhidharma. These formal systems, they all arrive at a point where they disagree. So one system is more realist, the other is more idealist. So what is it? and in the just as the interpretations. So he in this paper he does a very good job at laying out this what he called the loop, and but he doesn't give any pointers how to resolve it. And this for me is always the interesting thing. What do you do now? Okay, the world is paradoxical, but what now? This, and then I would say you can go further. You can, there's a way out, but it's not found by finding the ultimate interpretation, but through introspection. So intellectually, there may be the loop, maybe as far as we can get, but to go further, we need to learn how to turn the mind's eye inward. So this would be my conclusions. Chan practice emphasizes the importance of contemplation as a way to cultivate wisdom and compassion and to break free from habitual patterns and conditioning by realizing mind. In early Buddhism, consciousness is seen as a conditioned process whose dynamics is governed by the causal principle of dependent origination. In Mahayana Buddhism, consciousness is understood as empty, an illusion, a phantasm, a dream, and a projection within mind. Fundamental reality, encompassing all conditioned manifestations and unconditioned possibilities, is referred to as just mind. Formal descriptions of mind, though providing useful pointers for the practice, will remain incomplete. And my Zen teacher, he points it this way. He says, you will never know mind, but mind knows you. So this is a nice quote. This may also explain the difficulties of arriving at an ultimate interpretation of quantum mechanics. And the dynamics of physical processes as a manifestation within mind may also depend on mental aspects which, by design, will elude the scientific method. Quantum mechanics, with its paradoxa, may be the best possible description of the phenomenal world within the scientific method, which, by design, discards mental aspects. So thank you for your attention, and then thanks my teachers and friends for their support and encouragement to develop these ideas. Okay, so we're open for questions. I leave the presentation mode. Stop sharing.
Take it away, Michael. That was very impressive. Very, you spoke the whole thing without missing a beat. So it was amazing. So anyway.
Thank you. Well, it was quite a lot I put in, but I realized we have the recordings and I just did the same like Jay. So just put it all in. If people are interested, they can go back to the recording. I know it's much, it's a lot. Okay, Ben.
Hey, Michael, great talk. Yes, can you go back to the slide? Can you explain maybe again? I didn't get how Buddhism explains the different or unifies the different interpretations of quantum mechanics.
Okay. Well, I didn't really have a slide on this, so I would say that Buddhism would understand the moment you try to make sense of it, you will only get so far, because the ultimate reality is embedded within mind, which is inconceivable by definition. It is that which conceives, but you will never, from inside, you will never get outside. So, and this also applies to the interpretations of the purely physical world, which is, in my understanding, what quantum mechanics is trying to do, is to try to get at the best possible description of the physical world, ignoring all the mental thing. And then, since it's part of this impossibility to describe mind, the mathematics gives us a tool how to use it, but the moment we try to make sense of it, it may fail, because all we need is a tool. So in a sense, this Copenhagen pragmatism may have a certain wisdom in it. Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
So it's when you try to measure, so you're making the analogy that when you're trying to measure what's inconceivable, then you have all these kind of interpretations, and that's the best we can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of, it leaves you with nothing. It may be unsatisfying, but in a sense, it's very much in line with what is at the heart of the Buddhist practice. Is if you want to get wisdom or to arrive at this, you have to unthink. Don't add even more thought. And especially as scientists, we want to understand it. And as long as we don't understand it, we say we need to think deeper. So from a Buddhist point of view, you actually add to the problem by doing this.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask you a question about causality?
Yeah, Andre.
Yeah, so it's well known that causality is one of the cornerstones for Buddhism. I even read that Hume, he in fact met two Catholic monks who were in China, and causality came to European science from Buddhism. There is such story at least. On the other hand, we cannot be sure, it was many hundred years ago, yes. But on the other hand, if we read von Neumann and other founders of quantum mechanics is fundamentally acausal. So there is irreducible quantum randomness. So it looks that Buddhism and quantum mechanics could not be combined at all. That they are two very different views. So can you comment this?
Yeah, I had a slide on this, and I wanted to bring it in, but there's ultimately there's a way to describe this causal principle as where time actually where the causality is actually much closer to entanglement, to a correlation, so that there's no temporal difference anymore. So, and this is the original formulation of pratītyasamutpāda. It means when this arises, with this being, this is, when this ceases, this ceases. So it's hard to attach a timescale to it eventually. And especially in the later Buddhism, in the Mahayana, it's understood that time, space are mental fabrications. They are not ultimate realities. They are just renderings. So time is not seen as fundamental in Buddhism, and therefore also causality eventually not, but the entanglement of everything in much closer in a form of a correlation, this is taken to be more fundamental. Yeah.
Causality of Buddhism is not causality of classical physics. So it's just maybe misleading. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
If I may, a question. I was struck by the, or if you can possibly elaborate on this, when you mentioned the possible conflict and the idea that you cannot really work on causes but on conditions. That you can possibly elaborate on that. Once again, in my field, I'm interested from the perspective of like, conflict between human nature. If we create this split in the world, then how would this not working on causes but on conditions could be relevant for that question for environmental ethics, for example?
So one useful picture, I think, is a transistor and a network of transistors. So a transistor with very little current, you can control very big currents. And the big currents are usually causal, but the conditions would be the transistor and what is controlling the transistor. And so sometimes, one node, diplomatic nodes, just launched a war, which in a sense was already in preparation. but there was still this little thing which caused it. And without this, who knows? And like it brings the emphasis not onto the what, but more onto the how. How is one addressing problems like societal problems, environmental problems? If you try and put all your energy in improving the like climate deniers wrong, it's a misallocation. Just do the right thing and be mindful about how you what battles you pick. It's a bit like this. It's you don't need to prove anybody wrong. Just do the right thing. A lot of mental effort is misallocated by trying to prove yourself right, especially also in academia, of course. Just do the right thing. And for example, is climate change created by the burning of fossil fuels? In my way, there's no need to prove it. It's just foolish to burn resources, which at some point we will run out of. So just think about renewable energies right away. I mean, no need to prove that climate change is caused by this misallocation of energy.
Yeah.
Tells that Buddhism is anti-realist interpretation of world, that it is against realism.
I would say this is, I mean, Jay addressed it. I would say ultimately the moment you say something exists or doesn't exist, it will not withhold the Buddhist analysis. The moment you posit something, Buddhist right view will just pull the rug under it. So I would say it's much better to think of reality as a quantum superposition. It neither exists, it neither not exists. For me, it's the logic of the Madhyamika is very similar to a quantum, like a quantumness at the heart of it. And then it depends on from what direction you ask the question, you will get maybe an answer exists, but only because this question has been answered from this direction or asked from this direction. It's much more fluid.
Another question. Another question. You was maybe too speculative when you told that logic of quantum mechanics, quantum logic, and logic of Buddhism have something in common. No, because quantum logic, it's the main difference is just violation of distributivity law, and it's another way of processing of information. I don't think that you can find in Buddhism something similar to this.
Yeah, this is also not the aspect I meant. Maybe I know too little about it, but I meant more this like in the expansion, like to go beyond the binary logic of Aristotle and to include like in this also the Buddhists didn't come up with it. It was in the Indian system first. It's actually Indian logic. They always looked in the arguments, is something true? Is something false? This would be Aristotelian. Is something true and false, or neither true and false? And these are the four corners described in Buddhist or Indian logic. And then Buddhism takes all of these things away the moment you try to address reality, the nature of reality, and says it's neither this, neither this, neither this, neither this. What remains? For me, what remains is a kind of quantumness. But Buddhism would say this is of a mental nature. So keep looking. It always takes away. So this type of, it's called the tetralemma, and it can be related to the way we design possible response spaces in quantum experiments or so. I meant more the connection to set theory than the distributiveness, which may be interesting to look into.
It's many kinds of logics.
Yeah.
And why you maybe just too fashionable speak about quantum? Now many people speak about quantum just to to be in stream. Yes, there exist many non-classical logics.
Yes.
So maybe Buddhism has its own logic. For example, we do these quantum-like applications, and I had many conversations with Salinger, and he told, no, maybe you will find for mind its own logic, but it's not quantum logic. So it's just, maybe it's not so simple to connect Buddhism and quantum logic, yeah?
Yes, it's true. And I don't know enough about this field, but I need to read more about what type of.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
James, good to meet you.
Hi, Michael. Hey, this is not a question. I actually just want to throw something out because it fits in with what we've been talking about all day. So I'm a Vajrayana student, and in the Vajrayana in Dzogchen, there's a different form of emptiness in the sense of it's more developed. It has three aspects. So one is emptiness proper, just as Jay spoke about. The second one is awareness, which is not awareness that we think about, but actually being aware of the natural state in every moment. And the third one, they don't really talk about much, but I think it's really important, and it's called responsive naturing. It's actually great responsiveness in the traditional text translations. And great just means that it's not self-centered focused. It's like the compassion or the responsiveness of the Buddha. But the interesting thing about it that I found in the way it's sort of portrayed, and of course, the connection, you know, my interest in the Shurangama Sutra, and the connection with that is that talks about the practice of Avalokiteshvara, who is the bodhisattva of great responsiveness, Mahakaruna. And Mahakaruna, you know, it's responsiveness to the contextual conditions, the suffering of individuals being the one that they always talk about, of course, but it's not just that, it's the productive part of emptiness, that which actually, you know, you call it Buddha nature or whatever. And it's very, very much like the collapse of a wave function. It's the conditions, the potentials of a certain context, including the desires, the intent, the attention of the beings in it. And it responds to that by picking the particular potentials and motivating through the particular possibilities or anyway. So I just wanted to throw that out because I really got excited when you started talking about how you want to sort of bring the two in some way, Buddhism and quantum mechanics, in together. And I think that this is actually a way that can be accomplished. Because here you have something very specific in one of the Buddhist traditions, and it's supposedly very, very old, which really looks at the world as a set of possibilities and conditions, and there's a response to it. And the response picks one configuration, and then, you know, does it again and again and again. And it's not intentional on, you know, it's not like it's a brain or a being or anything like that. It's just happening. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out to you and you know, say hello face to face also.
Yeah, good to meet you after the email exchanges. So one thing I could add here, so this refers to bodhicitta, the awakening mind, and the intention to awaken all beings. And my teacher, he describes it as this, like mind has a interest to awaken parts of mind which are still sleeping. So this is a natural, in a sense, this is a compassion of mind, and I would locate this more in the 12 links diagram more in the intentional, like the volitional part, but it's not an ignorant volition. It's a type of it's an aspiration. So it's a chanda it's more a chanda than a craving, aspiration to awaken and to help. It's a wholesome motivation. It's still in samsara, but it's trying to push the system towards awakening, towards liberation. And
In response to the bodhicitta that you develop, yeah.
I would say this is bodhicitta, and as you develop it increases.
Yeah, that's how Buddhism works. It's like the two, cause effect or whatever. They're one thing.
And then I would say, out of this comes, since there's a deepening of understanding how mind works, there's a ever more skillful way of doing this with ever less interacting, in a sense. And this would be wisdom. And then wisdom would know when to collapse. But I wouldn't say it's a collapse per se at the heart of what you described. It's more the aspiration to help. What is and then when collapse is needed, bodhisattva manifests.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I'd love to talk to you more about it. I don't want to sort of talk over other people or bore them with this, but
we can do
let's talk more. Okay.
But
thank you. This has been wonderful. This has been wonderful.
Rinka.
I just wanted to add something to that, or to ask, that already struck me in the morning, I mean your morning, but in the presentation of Jay, when he was mentioning or mentioned 2 times that the aim of Buddhism is liberation of suffering, and the suffering, however understood, and now James mentioned that it's a bodhicitta, and I expected something about bodhicitta when the question was risen about the ethical part of Buddhism, but how to put it simply, isn't that suffering already collapsing? However understood, at whichever level of consciousness, not mind, etc., but there is something beyond mind or in consciousness collapsing into something. Suffering is already a concretization of an internal mistake, from the Buddhist point of view, but it is something become very practical and very 3D, and not a part of the mind any longer, because if it's a part of the mind, but it's separated from the mind. The mind has no power any longer, kind of to say there is no suffering for you, don't worry, Isn't it that already collapsed? I used to think that way, kind of, that any that kind of this is like as if form and matter decides that there is suffering, and that is already collapsing. But I might completely go in a wrong direction. Can you say something about that thing, please?
I would say it's a question of perspective, whether you look at it from inside the circle, from a self-referential, deluded point of view, or whether from outside in the liberated state. From inside, suffering will arise because of somebody suffering. So there's a agent, or there's a self which is created within mind, which takes itself for really being there, and then organizing everything around it. And this is what creates suffering. This is also what leads to more suffering. But seen from outside, what is happening there, it's perfectly arising due to causes and conditions. For example, the tendency to render experience in a self-referential way. So it's all good. The suffering is perfectly at its place, in a sense. it's just how you look at it from inside. The world looks difficult. From outside, well, that's what the causal stream is creating. And once with this realization, there's a way out, because then instead of remaining stuck in the suffering is taken as a wake-up call to now address it skillfully and gradually get your way out, because this is how mind works. Everything can be changed once you look at situations taking into account the mental component too. It may take a while, but it's not hopeless. This is why this understanding of karma is not like just
can I just sorry, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
But where then the bodhicitta is needed, if it is so, if it is just a normal way of happening, and it's good to have it, and then bodhicitta wouldn't be needed.
I would say the bodhicitta is like a catalyst. It's like using the wisdom of mind to see, okay, here a process is going on which could be easily dissolved with the right kick. And I would say bodhicitta is performing this. It's like mind applying like a subtle whatever is needed because of wisdom, seeing what is going on and helping, like addressing it in an efficient way. This would be the bodhicitta. And then you withdraw. You don't take credit. You just do what needs to be done. It's not about you helping. It's mind trying to awaken part of it which are still sleeping. Because this
then I have to rephrase my question. Avalokiteshvara is then also not needed.
Ultimately, all these beings are sentient beings, and according to the Diamond Sutra, they are illusory too. Ultimately, all of this is not truly there, but until this is realized, they need to be there. It's always.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, these are very good questions. And I'm not in a position, I mean, I just now, I just pass on what I learned from my teacher, but he's not there, otherwise I would be probably too nervous to even respond. Okay. Rinka, we cannot hear you, but.
Sorry, I just wanted to say thank you so much, because it's such a great opportunity to combine. I mean, I'm coming from the study of religion, I used to teach that, but the point is that to connect that with the quantum physics and to connect that with logical question that when you're talking about religion, you just see the history of religion, how it works, the ethics, etc., but you're not asking about connection to the quantum and where what helps and what does not help. So thank you. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I think there's a combination there, but it needs to be done by really knowing both systems well, and not just like in a haphazard way, as it has been often done. And then I think both traditions will also learn to respect each other mutually and learn to learn from each other. I mean, what Chris Fields was talking on Monday, it is very impressive. Like I could see how it maps neatly into Buddhism. But yeah. Anyway, Joyce, you have a question.
Hey, Michael, thank you very much for this overview, and very interesting, and the practice too. Thank you, leading us. So I do, it's interesting, but anyway, like even some of the things I maybe read like in Chinese now, seeing it in English, it's totally different feelings and context. Is quite interesting. So this also, of course, also making me wonder about the possibility even to really merging, or there are a lot of interesting with resemblance between the great minds and great wisdom, great ideas, and so on. But myself really thought about the possibility to rigorously done in the way that really rigorously done with the different kinds of beliefs, because like science and religion, like not a study of religion, but like religion as a practice or religion as a thinking. So I guess like I love both. I can see how they can be useful in different ways and so on, but I just haven't been convinced those can be really welded or like merged together. For example, I was wondering, like, what's even motivation? Why we even need to do so in the first place? I feel as if for example, religion, works. For example, like I was just looking up this article I read a long time ago by Feynman with I think it's something you can search on Google for actually. There is a full text from Caltech library about the relationship of science and religion. So, but of course, just one person's perfect. But I think like I guess like, mainstream scientific research as social behavior scientists too, you're like talking about what's a social scientific approach, then you have to compare those way of knowing for other ways of knowing, but also myself recognize those may be very limited. There may be some very, very overarching wisdom beyond others because we are knowing so little, so ignorant. But on the other hand, I do see a lot of, I do agree with like Feynman on a lot of things. For example, it's a belief, it's a faith about religion, it's true. But science about question is about doubting, it's about probability, it's about falsifying the theory and so on. So it's very different. So, and also like, for example, I was thinking it's great because it's even just like for me, it's also so interesting to read about how, like a lot of physicists and founding father of quantum theory influenced by some of the philosophy from the Asia and so on, and discover more and more those connections. So to me, it's really about how the great minds are thinking alike, but in different ways and different ways of knowing maybe and so on. But I just have a hard time to see why we need even to rigorously done so. That's the first thing, why we need. It's totally different. Maybe there's need for it. Second is that what is possible. For example, the resemblance of those ideas, but there are a lot of things that differ. So I think we selectively focused on those possible resemblance, but there are a lot of things that completely separate them. So, I was just
so
out of curiosity.
Thanks. There's no need to combine. This is just, I think, because I think it's my tendency. I discovered Buddhism very late in life, and when I read the sutras, my notes are mathematical. For me, it translates automatically into formula, and so it's my conditioning. But give this to an artist, they will associate it with something else and connect it to something totally different. So, and what I think is important here, and the main takeaway is to really look deeply into that our motivations matter. Even as scientists, we have a huge responsibility. And the moment we touch technology and we develop it, our motivation is crucial. Also now with AI also. Technology is neutral, but the mindset which develops it and the interests behind, they will make a big effect. And to really take time to look into this, that the effects are not just at what is being done, but also what is the motivation behind it. It's invisible, but it's as powerful, if not even more. To look into this component, and then to couple our work as a scientist with wisdom, with a appreciation for the interconnectedness of everything. And this is maybe the important message here, to take karma, this mechanism of karma. You cannot buy into it. This is not how one would do it. It needs to be realized, and but in order to see this, you have to allow for the possibility. What if intentions really change the world in a sense. So now you work with it, and maybe someday you start seeing it, and then it will change everything. Until then, you can keep it as a hypothesis, and you cannot just believe it. Buddhism would never advocate this. You only accept what you realized, and in order to realize it, you need to contemplate. So you have to put in the work. That's how it works.
Yeah, thank you. So is it fair to say it's more about working on the scientist, not on the science?
Yes,
Yeah,
the
I totally agree. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're working on more on the right brain, the idea of what Carol was saying. No, yeah.
Yeah, we are almost over time, so I don't need the session to go 2.5 hours like it's advocated. Last time we did 90 minutes. We are a little bit over time. We can do maybe like 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes, 15 as you want, but I would say not much more than so.
Mikhail, can I ask you again from the physics viewpoint? It looks that Buddhism support non-local interpretation of quantum mechanics, spooky action at the distance. Yes? Oh, it's bad. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The thing is, this is, for example, concentration practice. Not necessarily contemplation, but concentration can, like mental absorptions, there are different stages. Is like the mind is calmed down more and more and more. And at some point, like the module is switched off of time and space, first spatial perception and temporal too at some point. So once one has realized this, I'm not good at this type of concentration practices, but there are reports by people who can do this. Once you have seen through it, you cannot unsee it. And then these categories of time and space are seen as just mental constructs. Then possibilities like non-locality are no problem. But this needs to be realized. We as scientists, we can arrive to these conclusions through our mathematics. We kind of resist this possibility, but sometimes the mathematics is informing us. I mean, even in quantum field theory, when you look at the mathematics of antiparticles, are just particles traveling backwards in time. We resist this interpretation, but the mathematics sometimes is very wiser than what we are ready to believe. The same with imaginary time. Time and space cannot be real at the same time. There's always this imaginary constant. You can shift it on the one side, you can shift it on the other. So, but the Minkowski metric is telling us something very strange about the fabric of the reality already.
There's
Okay.
a hand up from Heather.
Yeah, Heather.
Yeah, I had this question and then you put in this quote, Michael, and I realize I'm probably asking it totally wrong. When I looked at some of the Chow meditation, it was speaking about this concept of the serene mind. And through this contemplative practice that you're bringing, not you, I shouldn't even assign that, the serene mind is coming into these interactions and spaces. And so I guess just piggybacking on your previous comment, how do you see that? What is the value added of bringing that into our conception of the quantum world? Or I know that kind of falls away from even that Buddhist approach now of you'll never know the mind, but the mind knows you. But I still see even applying that that use of metaphor, I still feel like there's something to be added to the conversation.
So the serenity of mind would refer to two things. It is calm, and it is illuminating. So, but it's more. First, it needs to be calm to be able to see clearly. So it's often considered to a pond, the surface of a pond. First, the pond needs to settle, and then the dust in it can settle too, and then one can see much deeper. This would be wisdom. When this is not there, one is just dazzled by the reflections at the surface and can't penetrate deeper. And this is how most of us operate. We just and the serenity would just point then out to the importance of, if we want to make wise decisions in life, to first train the mind and to not use the monkey mind, which we are using otherwise. And by doing this, our life will dramatically improve. And once we get hang out of it, we can show it to others and pass it along. This would be the compassionate side. I mean, I don't know. And in order to refer to quantum mechanics, I would say it's like this analogy I proposed of to stop projecting down all the time, to stop thinking. The thinking is always projecting experience into our mental framework, our habitual ways of seeing. It's not really helpful, because the moment we do it, we just embark on a virtual reality for some time, and true reality will call us back sooner or later, a bit like this, because we disconnect from what is actually going on. I'm not sure this answers the question. Okay, Ben, and then Matt, and then I think we can. Okay, Ben.
So I'm wondering if you have any quantum analogies to describe the different higher jhana states, since we're on this topic of absorption. So for example, as you go up the jhana stages, you go from form jhana to formless jhanas, and the fifth and sixth jhana respectively, they represent the infinity of space and the infinity of consciousness. So I don't know if you have any quantum analogies, like the hydrogen wave function, to express like where is it really infinity of consciousness, or is it just saying that the space and consciousness is not localized, but it's actually wave function? What's your take on that?
Okay, as I mentioned, I'm not very good at jhana practice, but the way maybe what could be helpful, the way I think about it, is to look at all these processes as embedded in a type of cosmic neural network, and then which may be hierarchical. And what the jhanas may help you to do is to go up a hierarchy, but it's still phenomenal. So it's still consciousness. It's not it. So even if you have these abilities, it can actually trap you, because soon you can experience how it feels without time and space. You can, according to the Buddhist scriptures, you can read out past lives. You can travel to distances because the notion of spatial separation has collapsed. This is a huge trap for the ego and the self-referentiality to sneak back in. This is why the Zen practice is not encouraging jhana practice. And I still need to come across a jhana practitioner who impresses me by their wisdom. So far, I haven't really met one. Maybe one Theravada monk, but this is like this neural network analogy would be helpful. And in the Zen, in Mahayana, the emphasis is on wisdom, not on concentration. Of course, it's helpful. It's sometimes, I mean, I could go on for this, but to answer your question, maybe a cosmic neural network may be an interesting way to think of it.
Okay, a quick question on this topic is, when you mention things like afterlife and past life, is there any way you can verify these claims, or is it just, you have all these practitioners, they've all meditated for 10,000 hours, they all agree on the same thing, and so it must be the case? Is there any way you can validate those claims?
Yeah. My way of working with this is, from a scientific point of view, you would discard it right away. I keep looking into it because I seen that stuff is possible. Like there can be sudden download of information. You have no idea where it comes from. It's without a spiritual practice, you would say it's intuition. These things are possible. But eventually you have to realize these things for yourself. Then you can accept it. Until then, you can discard it. You can be open to it, but you would not accept it unless you've seen it for yourself. Yeah.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, Matt.
Hey,
Matt.
Michael, love your talk. Makes me think about what you spoke about, the undisturbed wave function before any measurement. And then you said later, stop projecting all the time. I'm thinking that's exactly the mental picture I want to think of if I'm trying to calm my mind down in the practice itself, is imagine no measurement. But am I off base there? Is that part of what you're doing when you do the contemplation?
Yeah, ultimately, if you apply this quantum picture, I would say ultimately the dynamics is the natural dynamics is just the Hamiltonian is just what would naturally unfold. The moment we add to it because we think we have, because of the impulse, well, we kill it. We kill the situation in some sense, to bring it down into something we know. So this gives the self a feeling of safeness, of security, because it prefers to deal with something it knows, even though it will disrupt the entire situation. So we don't need to do this, and then it doesn't mean that the world will collapse. It just means we will flow through life much more naturally and more kind and more constructive because we are aligned with causes and conditions.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. I like the do the right thing, because if let's say I aspire to encourage young people like my grandson and others to learn about the world, and if you just do the right thing and reach out to them with that action, with that supportive action, then everything else follows. Like it's less effort.
Because you are working with mind the way it's intended. Then there's like a wholesome intention injected into it, which then may manifest in words, but it's not the words. It's in the heart. It's in the unspoken. This matters.